The door opened without warning. Han Seojun stood frozen in the threshold of his private study, his hand still gripping the brass handle. Rain hammered against the mansion windows behind him, but the sound faded into nothing. He was there. Zara Adeyemi stood beside the shattered remains of a gilded mirror, fragments scattered at her feet like fallen stars. Her uniform clung to her skin, soaked through, translucent against her shoulder where the fabric had slipped. His eyes dropped before he could stop them. Her collarbone. The curve of her neck. The rain still dripping from her braids onto bare skin. His body tightened. Heat flooded his chest. She looked up. Their eyes met. And she saw it, the fracture in his perfect control. The hunger he had buried for months, now exposed in the silence between them. Neither moved. Neither breathed. The grandfather clock in the hallway struck midnight, each chime echoing through the marble corridors like a funeral toll. Something irreversible had just happened. Thank you for joining us on this journey. If you're enjoying the story so far, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe. Your support helps us bring more stories like this to life. Now let us go back to the beginning. 3 months earlier, the rain had been gentler. Zara Adeyemi stood at the iron gates of the Han estate, her single suitcase clutched against her chest like a shield. The mansion rose before her, a fortress of glass and black stone that seemed to swallow the gray Seoul sky. She had seen photographs during the interview process. Nothing had prepared her for the reality. The structure sprawled across the hillside like a sleeping predator, its modernist angles softened by traditional Korean elements, curved rooflines, paper screens visible through floor-to-ceiling windows, a stone garden that disappeared into morning mist. Beautiful. Terrifying. A security camera above the gate rotated slowly, its red eye fixing on her face. Zara lifted her chin. She had not traveled 6,000 miles to show fear at a camera. The housekeeper who met her at the service entrance was a severe woman in her 50s named Mrs. Kwon. Her gray hair was pulled back so tightly it seemed to lift the corners of her eyes, and she looked at Zara the way one might examine an insect that had wandered into a clean kitchen. "You are smaller than expected," Mrs. Kwon said in crisp English. The previous girl was taller. "I'm stronger than I look." Mrs. Kwon's expression did not change. "We shall see." She turned and walked into the mansion without waiting. Zara followed. The service corridors were a different world from the grandeur she had glimpsed through the windows. Here the walls were plain white. The floors were polished concrete. The lighting was harsh fluorescent that hummed faintly overhead. This was the skeleton of the house, the arteries through which staff moved unseen, keeping the beautiful facade alive. "You will rise at 5, Mrs. Kwon said, her heels clicking against the floor. "You will prepare the master's tea by 5:30. You will clean the east wing before 7. You will not speak unless spoken to. You will not enter the west wing under any circumstances." "What's in the west wing?" Mrs. Kwon stopped walking. The sudden silence pressed against Zara's ears. "Questions." Mrs. Kwon turned slowly. The previous girl asked questions. "And where is she now?" Mrs. Kwon smiled. It did not reach her eyes. "Gone." Zara's room was in the staff quarters on the ground floor, a space barely larger than a closet, containing a narrow bed, a small dresser, and a window that looked out onto a concrete wall. She set her suitcase on the bed and sat beside it. Her hands were shaking. She pressed them flat against her thighs until the trembling stopped. This was the choice she had made. This was the path she had chosen. Her father's debts hung over her family like a guillotine blade, and every month she stayed here, every one she sent home, that blade rose a little higher. She thought of her mother's voice on the phone 3 weeks ago, the exhaustion beneath the forced cheerfulness, the way she had said, "We're managing, dear," in that tone that meant they were drowning. She thought of her younger brother, brilliant and desperate to attend university, working double shifts at a factory instead. She thought of her father's face in the hospital bed, the machines beeping their steady countdown, his hand gripping hers as he whispered, "I'm sorry, my daughter. I'm so sorry." Zara pressed her palms against her eyes until stars exploded in the darkness. She would not cry. She had not cried since the funeral, and she would not start now. The Han mansion operated on silence. This was the first thing Zara truly understood by the end of her first week. Sounds were absorbed by thick carpets, swallowed by high ceilings, muffled by heavy doors. Footsteps that should have echoed instead whispered. Voices that should have carried instead died within feet of their source. The staff, a small army of groundskeepers, cooks, drivers and cleaners, moved through the house like ghosts, appearing only when needed, vanishing the moment their tasks were complete. They did not speak to each other in the hallways. They did not gather in common areas. They existed in parallel, never intersecting. "It's safer that way," whispered Young-hee, one of the kitchen girls, when Zara asked why. "If you don't know anything, you can't say anything." "Say anything about what?" Young-hee's face went pale. She walked away without answering. For the first 3 weeks, Zara did not see the master of the house. She heard him, sometimes, the distant murmur of his voice through closed doors, the sound of his footsteps in hallways she was forbidden to enter, the purr of expensive engines arriving and departing at odd hours. She felt his presence the way one feels a storm approaching. A pressure change, a heaviness in the air, a pricking sensation along her skin. The other staff members spoke of him in fragments. "He notices everything," Mrs. Kwan said once during inspection of Zara's work. "Every speck of dust. Every wrinkle in a tablecloth. Every second of delay." "He hasn't slept in 3 days," she overheard a driver whisper to the chef. "The meetings with the Kim faction aren't going well." "He killed a man," breathed one of the gardeners to another when they thought no one was listening. "With his bare hands. I heard it from someone who was there." Zara filed these fragments away like pieces of a puzzle she wasn't sure she wanted to complete. The study was her responsibility. It was the one room in the East Wing where the master conducted his private business. A vast space lined with books she could not read, furnished with leather and dark wood, dominated by a desk that looked older than the nation itself. She cleaned it every afternoon between 2 and 3, when he was allegedly occupied elsewhere. She learned the placement of everything. Every pen, every paper, every subtle angle of every object. She learned to dust without displacing, to polish without altering, to move through the space without leaving evidence of her presence. She learned the smell of the room. Leather and paper and something darker underneath, something metallic and dangerous that she could not name. She learned, without meaning to anticipate him. The first time she saw him she was on her knees. She had dropped a glass figurine, a small crystal crane that sat on the corner of his desk, and was desperately searching for the fragment that had chipped away, her fingers scraping against the hardwood floor beneath the bookshelf. The door opened. Footsteps. Then silence. Zara's heart stopped. She turned her head slowly, still kneeling, and looked up. Han Seo-jun stood in the doorway. He was tall, taller than she had expected, with the lean, coiled build of someone who had learned violence young and never quite released it. His suit was charcoal gray, immaculate, cut so precisely it seemed to have been stitched directly onto his body. His face was a study in controlled angles. Sharp jaw, high cheekbones, eyes so dark they seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. And on his wrist, visible beneath his cuff as his hand rested on the door frame, a tattoo. Black ink. Traditional Korean design. The pattern was intricate, waves or flames or something older, something symbolic that Zara did not understand. But she understood the tattoo's presence. This was not a man who had chosen that mark for decoration. His eyes dropped to the crystal crane in her hand. Then to the floor where she knelt. Then slowly, deliberately to her face. Zara felt the weight of his attention like a physical pressure against her chest. "The crane is damaged." His voice was quiet, almost soft, but there was something beneath it, something that made Zara's survival instincts scream. "I'm sorry, sir." She rose to her feet, keeping her eyes lowered. "I was cleaning and I—" "Look at me." She lifted her gaze. His expression revealed nothing. His eyes were flat, empty, as unreadable as polished stone. "That crane was a gift from my father." Zara's blood went cold. "Before he died," Seo-jun continued, his voice unchanged. "He placed it in my hands and told me it represented something important. Do you know what?" Zara shook her head. "Control." He took a step forward. "The crane must stand perfectly still to catch its prey. Any movement, any tremor, any loss of composure, and the fish escapes." Another step. He was close enough now that she could smell his cologne, something expensive and subtle, layered over the warmth of his skin. "I value control, miss Adeyemi." Her voice came out steady. He was proud of that. Zara Adeyemi. Miss Adeyemi. He seemed to taste the syllables. I value control above all things. Do you understand? Yes, sir. Then understand this. He reached out and took the damaged crane from her hand. His fingers brushed hers, just for a moment, just long enough for her to feel the calluses on his palm, the unexpected heat of his skin. You will repair what you have broken. And you will not fail again. He turned and walked away. The door closed behind him. Zara stood frozen in the silence, her heart hammering against her ribs, the ghost of his touch burning on her fingers. She did not sleep that night. Every time she closed her eyes she saw his face, the terrible blankness of it, the way his gaze had stripped her bare without effort. She saw the tattoo on his wrist, dark against his skin. She felt his fingers brush hers. Stop, she told herself. Stop this. He was her employer. He was dangerous. He was everything she could not afford to think about. But the thought remained, lodged beneath her skin like a splinter she could not remove. The next morning she found a small package outside her door. Inside was a repair kit for Crystal, specialized adhesive polishing compounds, tools smaller than needles. There was no note. The repair took her 3 nights. She worked in her room after her shifts ended, hunched over the small desk beneath the inadequate lamp, her hands steady despite the exhaustion that pulled at her bones. The missing fragment was too small to save. She had searched the study floor for an hour before accepting that it was lost, swept up perhaps, or fallen into some crack between the floorboards. So she improvised. She shaped a new piece from wire and glass, using techniques her grandmother had taught her years ago in Lagos. The art of taking broken things and making them whole again, making them new. When she finished, the crane was not the same. But it was perhaps more beautiful. She left it on his desk during her afternoon cleaning shift. She did not see him that day or the next. But on the 3rd day she noticed the crane had been moved, positioned now at the center of the desk, where it caught the afternoon light through the windows and scattered tiny rainbows across the leather surface. She stared at it for a long moment. Then she continued cleaning. The weeks blurred together. Autumn deepened into winter. The gardens outside turned skeletal, their beauty stripped down to bare branches and frost. The mansion grew colder despite the heating systems that hummed constantly through the walls. Zara learned the rhythms of the house. She learned which doors were locked and which only appeared to be. She learned the schedules of the other staff members, the times when corridors were empty, the routes that allowed her to move unseen. She learned without meaning to Han Seo-jun's patterns. He worked late, often until 2 or 3 in the morning, the light in his study visible from the garden when she walked the grounds before bed. He exercised early, a private gym somewhere in the depths of the mansion where staff was forbidden. He ate alone when he ate at all, and the kitchen staff whispered about plates returned untouched. He held meetings in the West Wing, men in dark suits, their faces hard, their voices raised in Korean she could not follow. Sometimes she heard glass breaking. Sometimes silence. Sometimes screaming. She learned not to ask about the West Wing. He saw him occasionally. In hallways, brief glimpses, his long stride carrying him past before she could properly lower her eyes. In doorways, that terrible stillness as he watched her work, his presence a weight against her spine. In the study, moments of overlap when her timing failed, when she found herself frozen beneath his gaze. He never spoke to her. But he watched. She could feel his attention like a physical touch, the way his eyes would track her movements, linger on her hands, follow her across a room. It should have frightened her. It did frighten her. But there was something else beneath the fear, something that made her heart race, her breath catch, her skin flush with heat she could not explain. He began to watch him too. She noticed things. The way he held himself apart from the men who served him. A distance that was not arrogance but isolation. The way his expression shifted almost imperceptibly, when he thought no one was looking. Flickers of something that might have been exhaustion or grief, or a loneliness so profound it had become architectural. The way his hands sometimes trembled when he reached for his tea. The only evidence she ever saw that he was human beneath the armor. The way sometimes she caught him looking at her when she was supposed to be invisible. December arrived with ice. The mansion transformed for a party. The first event Zara had witnessed since her arrival. Decorators swarmed the public rooms, draping them in white and silver. Caterers took over the kitchen, displacing the regular staff with military efficiency. Security doubled, then tripled, men with earpieces stationed at every entrance. The Kim faction, Mrs. Kwan said during the pre-event briefing, her voice stripped of its usual severity. They are discussing terms with the master. Tonight is about appearances. About power. Everything must be perfect. Everything. Zara was assigned to the coat room. It was a small mercy, a position that kept her hidden, that required only efficiency and silence. But fate, she was learning, had no interest in mercy. The party was a glittering nightmare. Guests arrived in waves. Men in suits that cost more than Zara's annual salary, women in gowns that flowed like liquid metal. They spoke in Korean, in English, in languages she did not recognize. They laughed too loudly and smiled too widely and watched each other with eyes that calculated value with every glance. Zara took their coats with steady hands and appropriate deference. She was invisible to them and she preferred it that way. Han Seo-jun entered the main hall at precisely 9 o'clock. Zara saw him through the coat room doorway, a figure in black amid the silver and white, his presence drawing every eye in the room even as he seemed entirely separate from the celebration around him. He wore his suit-like armor, every line precise. The tattoo on his wrist was hidden tonight, his cuffs buttoned high, his sleeves immaculate. But she knew it was there. She watched him move through the crowd, acknowledging greetings with minimal nods, exchanging words that were too brief to be conversation. He was performing, she realized, playing the role of host while remaining utterly untouched by it. Their eyes met briefly across the crowded room. She looked away first. The trouble began after midnight. Zara had stepped out of the coat room to retrieve a fallen wrap from the hallway when she heard it. Voices raised in the adjacent corridor, the sharp crack of flesh against flesh. She pressed herself against the wall, heart pounding. "Think you can hide from us?" A man's voice, thick with alcohol and threat. "You think your little arrangement protects you? Please." A woman's voice. Terrified. "Young. I wasn't. You were in his study. We have photographs. What did you tell him?" Zara's blood went cold. She knew she should leave. She should walk back to the coat room, close her eyes, forget what she had heard. But the woman was crying now, soft, broken sounds that cut through Zara's better judgment. She moved. The scene around the corner was worse than she had imagined. 3 men in expensive suits had cornered one of the serving girls, the kitchen assistant Young-hee, who had warned her about knowing too much. They had her pressed against the wall, one of them gripping her jaw, forcing her face up. "Tell us what you saw in the West Wing," the largest one demanded. "Tell us, or we'll find other ways to make you talk." "I don't know anything," Young-hee sobbed. I don't." "Perhaps," a voice said quietly, "you should release her." Everyone turned. Han Seo-jun stood at the end of the corridor. He was perfectly still, his hands clasped behind his back, his expression revealing nothing. But something had changed in his eyes, a cold light that made the temperature in the hallway seem to drop. "Mr. Han." The largest man released Young-hee, who crumpled to the floor with a sob. "We were just questioning your staff about security concerns. You understand." "I understand," Seo-jun said, "that you have laid hands on someone under my protection." "Protection." The man laughed, but there was nervousness beneath it. "She's a servant. Replaceable. Everyone in this house is under my protection." Seo-jun's voice did not rise. Did not need to. "Everyone." His eyes flicked to Zara, who was still frozen against the wall. She saw something shift in his gaze. Recognition, calculation, something else she could not name. "Take her to her room," he said to Zara, nodding toward Young-hee. "And stay there until the party is over." Zara moved without thinking, helping Young-hee to her feet, half carrying her down the service corridor. Behind them, she heard the 3 men begin to speak again. Then she heard them stop. She did not look back. Young-hee cried in Zara's room until nearly 2 in the morning. The story came out in fragments between sobs. How she had accidentally entered the West Wing while lost. How she had seen men in that corridor carrying something wrapped in sheets. How the sheets had been stained with red. "I didn't see anything," she kept saying. "I didn't see anything real. Just shapes. Just colors. But they knew I was there. The cameras. They watch everything." Zara held her and made soft sounds of comfort and wondered what she had gotten herself into. You saved me, Young-hee whispered finally, her voice exhausted. By being there. If you hadn't come around that corner, if Mr. Han hadn't followed you. What do you mean followed me? Young-hee looked at her with red-rimmed eyes. He wasn't coming to save me, Zara. He doesn't even know my name. But he knows yours. Everyone knows he knows yours. That doesn't make sense. Nothing in this house makes sense. Young-hee's voice cracked. Just, be careful. Whatever he wants from you, be careful. She fell asleep shortly after, curled on Zara's narrow bed. Zara sat on the floor beneath the window, watching the moonlight shift across the walls, and tried to make her heart stop racing. After that night, everything changed. The change was subtle, imperceptible perhaps to anyone who wasn't paying attention. But Zara was paying attention. She noticed the new guard who appeared outside her door each evening, stationed there until sunrise. She noticed the improvement in her meals. Fresh fruit, quality meat, portions that could not be coincidence. She noticed the way Mrs. Kwan's severity softened, almost imperceptibly when she addressed her. She noticed that Han Seo-jun had stopped disappearing. He was everywhere now. In the study when she came to clean, seated at his desk as though he had been waiting. In the hallways when she walked them, his stride slowing to match hers for a few brief steps before he continued on. In the doorways of rooms she entered, watching her work with that unreadable expression. He still did not speak to her. But the silence between them had changed. It was heavier now. Charged. Full of something that pressed against Zara's lungs and made it difficult to breathe. The first time he touched her again, it was winter's darkest night. She was carrying linens through the East Wing corridor when she stumbled, her foot catching on an uneven floorboard, her balance failing. The linens flew from her arms, scattering across the polished floor. Hands caught her waist. Strong hands. Warm hands. Hands that held her upright with an ease that should have been impossible. She turned her head. Han Seo-jun stood behind her, his face inches from hers, his breath warm against her cheek. The tattoo on his wrist was visible now. The sleeve of his dress shirt had ridden up, revealing intricate lines of black ink that seemed to pulse in the dim hallway light. Careful, he said quietly. His hands were still on her waist. She could feel the heat of his palms through the fabric of her uniform, branding her, burning her. Thank you, sir. He did not release her. You should watch where you walk, Miss Adeyemi. This house has many, uneven surfaces. I'll be more careful. So he did not move. His eyes dropped to her lips, lingered there. Then with visible effort rose again to meet her gaze. Something flickered in their depths, something hot and hungry and immediately suppressed. See that you are. He released her and walked away. Zara stood in the corridor for a long time, her heart pounding, her skin burning where he had touched her. The dreams began that night. Fragments of heat and shadow. His hands on her skin, his voice in her ear, his body pressing hers against surfaces that shifted and changed with each moment. She woke gasping, tangled in sweat-damp sheets, the phantom sensation of his touch still sparking across her nerve endings. She lay in the darkness and stared at the ceiling and told herself it meant nothing. She was a very poor liar even to herself. New Year's Eve arrived with snow. The mansion was hosting again. A smaller gathering this time, just business associates and their wives. Zara had been assigned to circulate with appetizers, a position that required her to move through the party unseen. She was very good at being unseen. But Han Seo-jun saw her. Every time she entered a room, his eyes found her. Every time she passed near him, his conversation would pause, just for a heartbeat, just long enough for his gaze to track her movement. The other guests noticed nothing. But Zara felt his attention like a hand around her throat. The confrontation happened in the library. She had slipped away to catch her breath, the constant performance of invisibility wearing thin. The library was supposed to be off-limits to guests, a private space, dim and quiet, smelling of old paper and leather. She leaned against the bookshelves and closed her eyes. The door opened. She knew it was him before she turned. Knew it by the weight of the air, by the way her heart immediately began to race, by the electricity that crackled across her skin. You should not be here. His voice was soft. Dangerous. Neither should you. She turned to face him. He stood in the doorway, silhouetted against the light from the hall. His bow tie was slightly loosened, his hair marginally disheveled. He looked almost human. Almost. I own this house, he said. I can be anywhere I choose. And I'm your employee. I can be anywhere I'm assigned. You were not assigned to the library. And yet here we both are. Something shifted in his expression, surprise perhaps at her audacity. He was not used to being challenged. Good Tsar thought. Let him learn. He stepped into the room. The door swung shut behind him, silently, automatically sealing them in shadows. The only light came from the street lamps outside the window, filtered through frost-covered glass. It painted everything in shades of blue and silver, including him. You're afraid of me, he said. It was not a question. Yes. But you keep looking at me. Her breath caught. I don't. You do. Another step closer. In the hallways. In the study. You watch me when you think I'm not paying attention. You're my employer. I don't. His voice sharpened. Don't insult us both with lies. Silence stretched between them. He was close now. Close enough that she could see the tattoo peeking above his collar, a hint of ink at the edge of his neck. Close enough that she could smell his cologne again, that expensive subtle scent layered over something warmer. Close enough that she could see the fracture in his control. What do you want from me? The question escaped before she could stop it. His jaw tightened. His hands hanging at his sides, curled into fists. I don't know. The admission seemed to cost him something. She watched his carefully constructed facade crack, just slightly, just enough to reveal the chaos beneath. I have built my life on control, he continued, his voice rough. On discipline. On never allowing myself to want anything I could not have. And now. His eyes dropped to her lips again. This time he did not look away. Now there is you. The word hung between them, heavy, dangerous, irrevocable. I am your maid, Sarah whispered. I know. This cannot happen. I know. But he took another step forward, closing the distance between them until she could feel the heat radiating from his body, until she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. Tell me to leave, he said. Tell me and I will go. Her mouth opened. Nothing came out. He raised his hand. Slowly, so slowly she could have stopped him, could have stepped back, could have remembered all the reasons this was impossible. He reached toward her face. His fingers hovered at her cheek. Not touching. The barest whisper of space between his skin and hers. She could feel the heat of him. Could feel her own body leaning toward that heat, desperate and treacherous. If I touch you, he said softly, I will not stop. Then don't touch me. But her voice broke on the words. His fingers trembled, she saw it, the subtle shake that betrayed his legendary composure. The door burst open. Light flooded the room. Mrs. Kwon stood in the doorway, her face carefully blank. Sir. The Kim representatives are asking for you. Han Seo-jun did not move. His hand was still raised, still hovering at Zara's cheek, the moment suspended between them like a held breath. Then slowly he lowered his arm. Tell them I'll be there shortly. Sir, they insist. I said shortly. His voice cracked like a whip. Mrs. Kwon flinched, the first human reaction Zara had ever seen from her, and retreated. The door closed again. But the moment was broken. Seo-jun stepped back. The mask descended over his features, the cold, controlled expression she had learned to fear. Return to your duties, he said. Sir. That is not a request. She stared at him, at the rigid line of his shoulders, the way his hands were clenched so tightly the tendons stood out like cables, the careful distance he had placed between them. Yes, sir. She walked past him to the door. Miss Adeyemi. She stopped, her hand on the handle. This conversation never happened. She did not turn around. Of course. She opened the door and stepped into the light, leaving him alone in the shadows. January was brutal. The cold seeped into the mansion's bones despite the heating, turning every shadow into ice. The staff moved faster, spoke less, bundled into layers that made them shapeless. Zara worked until her hands cracked and her muscles screamed. She did not look at Han Seo-jun. She did not let herself think about the library, about his voice saying, now there is you, about the tremble in his fingers as they hovered at her cheek. She was invisible again. She would remain invisible. It was safer that way. But she could not control her dreams. They came every night now, vivid and ruthless, leaving her gasping awake in the darkness with his name on her lips. She dreamed of his hands on her waist, his breath against her neck, his body pressing hers against bookshelves and walls and surfaces that crumbled beneath them. She dreamed of his voice, soft and desperate, saying things that could not be unsaid. She woke exhausted and aching and full of a hunger she had no words for. 3 weeks after New Year's, she discovered the cameras. It happened by accident. She was cleaning one of the guest rooms when she noticed a small irregularity in the molding near the ceiling. The pattern was wrong, broken by something dark and metallic that caught the light. She stood on a chair to examine it. Tiny, sophisticated, aimed directly at the bed. Her blood ran cold. She searched the room systematically, behind paintings, inside light fixtures, within the decorative elements that filled every corner. She found 3 more. Every room, Young-hee whispered when Zara told her. Every room in this house has cameras. The staff quarters, the hallways, the bathrooms. The bathrooms. Not those. But everywhere else. Young-hee's eyes were wild. He watches everything, Zara. He sees everything that happens here. He. Mr. Han. The master. Young-hee grabbed her hands. Don't you understand? He knows when we come and go. He knows who we talk to. He knows. She stopped. Her face went pale. He knows about the library, she whispered. He must have seen you. In the library with him. Zara's stomach dropped. There were no cameras in the library. There are cameras everywhere. Young-hee's voice cracked. Why do you think the previous girl left? She saw something she shouldn't have. He tried to use it. And then she was gone. Just gone. What are you saying? But Young-hee was already backing away, shaking her head. I've said too much. Forget I said anything. Please, Zara. For both our sakes. Forget. She fled down the corridor. Zara stood alone in the frozen hallway, the weight of unseen eyes pressing against her skin. That night she searched her room. She found the camera in the smoke detector, a tiny lens almost invisible aimed at her bed. He stared at it for a long time. Then she took a piece of tape and covered it. The summons came the next morning. Mrs. Kwon appeared at her door with an expression that could have frozen fire. Mr. Han wishes to see you. In his private office. Immediately. Zara's heart stopped. Did he say why? Mr. Han does not explain himself to servants. And neither do I. The walk to his office felt endless. Her footsteps echoed through empty corridors, past doors that remained closed, beneath lights that flickered almost imperceptibly. He thought about running. She thought about the cameras that tracked her every movement. He kept walking. His office was in the West Wing. She had never been here before, had been explicitly forbidden from entering this part of the house. The corridor was different from the rest of the mansion. Darker, narrower, lined with doors that had no handles on the outside. The air smelled different too. Ugh. Antiseptic. Wrong. She stopped outside the door Mrs. Kwon had indicated. She raised her hand to knock. The door opened before her knuckles could touch the wood. Han Seo-jun sat behind a desk that made the one in his study look modest. The office was vast, floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over Seoul's glittering skyline, walls lined with screens showing security feeds from every corner of the mansion, furniture that spoke of power so absolute it did not need to be displayed. He was not looking at the screens. He was looking at her. You covered your camera. His voice was quiet. Conversational. The tone a predator might use with cornered prey. I wanted privacy. Privacy. He tasted the word. In my house. You wanted privacy. Yes. He leaned back in his chair. The tattoo on his neck was visible above his collar. The edge of something that curved down toward his collarbone, disappearing beneath his shirt. Do you know what those cameras are for, Miss Adeyemi? Surveillance. Control. Watching people without their knowledge. Something flickered in his eyes. Surprise, perhaps. Or appreciation. Protection, he said. They are for protection. This house contains things that powerful people want. Information. Leverage. Secrets that could destroy empires. And you need to watch your maids to protect those secrets? His jaw tightened. I need to watch everyone. Even in their bedrooms? Even when they sleep? Especially then. He rose from his chair, moving around the desk with that predator's grace she was learning to fear. People reveal themselves in private moments. Their fears. Their allegiances. Their desires. He stopped in front of her. Close. Too close. Tell me, Miss Adeyemi. What do your private moments reveal about you? She should have been afraid. She was afraid. But beneath the fear was something else. Something hot and defiant that rose up in her chest like a tide. Perhaps you should check the recordings. His eyes widened fractionally. You covered the camera. Before that. Silence stretched between them. She watched his expression shift. Curiosity, calculation, something darker that made her breath catch. Why are you not afraid of me? I am afraid of you. And yet you challenge me. You look me in the eyes. You speak to me as though. As though what? As though I'm a person. His hand shot out. He gripped her chin, not hard enough to hurt but firm enough to hold her in place. His palm was warm against her skin, his fingers calloused from some violence she could not imagine. As though you have forgotten what I am, he said softly. What I can do. What I have done. I haven't forgotten. Then why are you still standing here? Why haven't you run? Because I can't, she thought. Because every time I try to leave this room in my mind, something pulls me back. Because you've gotten under my skin and I don't know how to remove you. But she said none of this. Instead she said, because I don't think you'll hurt me. His grip tightened. You're wrong. Am I? His thumb brushed across her lower lip. Just barely, just enough to send electricity sparking down her spine. I could destroy you, he whispered. I could make you disappear so completely that no one would ever know you existed. I've done it before. To people who crossed me. To people who knew too much. Is that what you're going to do to me? I should. But you won't. Something cracked in his expression. Pain. Hunger. A loneliness so vast it seemed to swallow the room. No, he said. I won't. He released her chin. He stepped back. The mask descended once more, but this time she could see the cracks. The places where his control was fracturing, where something human was fighting to break through. The camera will remain covered, he said. But understand this, Miss Adeyemi. You are not invisible to me. You have never been invisible. And that is dangerous for both of us. Why? He turned away, walking back to his desk, putting distance between them. Because there are people in my world who pay attention. Who notice when I notice someone. And when they notice. He did not finish the sentence. He did not need to. You may go. Zara walked to the door on legs that trembled. Miss Adeyemi. She stopped. Be careful who you trust in this house. Not everyone is who they appear to be. She opened the door. She did not look back. The new head of security arrived 3 days later. His name was Park Jin-ho, and he was beautiful in the way a blade is beautiful. Sharp and cold and designed for harm. He smiled often, which the other staff members found charming. But Zara noticed that his smiles never reached his eyes. She noticed other things too. The way he watched Han Seo-jun with barely concealed hunger. The way his questions about household routines were slightly too specific. The way his attention kept drifting toward her, lingering longer than comfort allowed. He asks about you, Young, he whispered one afternoon. Park Jin-ho. He asked Mrs. Kwon about your background, your family, how long you've been here. Why would he care about me? I don't know. Young-hee's face was pale. But I don't trust him. There's something wrong about him. Something empty. Zara remembered Seo-jun's warning. Not everyone is who they appear to be. She began watching Park Jin-ho the way she watched everything else in this house. Carefully, quietly, invisibly. She noticed that he spent long hours in the West Wing, in rooms she was forbidden to enter. She noticed that he took phone calls in the garden, always alone, always speaking too softly to be overheard. She noticed the way he smiled at Han Seo-jun during their morning briefings, the admiration in his expression that seemed just slightly too perfect. She noticed one night that he followed her. She was walking the grounds after her shift, a habit she had developed to clear her head, to escape the oppressive weight of the mansion. The gardens were frozen but beautiful, their skeletal branches traced with frost that glittered in the security lights. She heard footsteps behind her. He kept walking. Beautiful night, Park Jin-ho said, falling into step beside her. Cold but beautiful. Yes. You walk out here often. I've seen you on the cameras. I wasn't aware that was forbidden. It's not. He smiled. I'm just curious about you, Miss Adeyemi. The other staff members keep their heads down, do their work, don't attract attention. But you? What about me? You attract attention without trying. His eyes gleamed in the darkness. Mr. Han's attention specifically. Zara's heart stuttered. I don't know what you mean. Don't you? He stopped walking, forcing her to stop too. I've watched the recordings, Miss Adeyemi. I've seen the way he looks at you. The way he follows you with his eyes. The way he stepped closer. The way he trembles when you're near. You're mistaken. Am I? His smile widened, but there was nothing warm in it. The mighty Han Seojun brought low by a servant. By a foreigner. It's almost poetic, isn't it? I should go. She turned to leave. His hand shot out, gripping her arm. I think, he said softly, that you should be very careful, Miss Adeyemi. The world Mr. Han moves in. It's not kind to weakness. And you are his weakness now, whether you like it or not. Let go of me. There are people who would pay a great deal to know about you. To know how to hurt him through you. I wonder. Let go of her. The voice came from the shadows. Park Jin-ho released her arm immediately, stepping back with practiced ease. Han Seojun emerged from the darkness between the hedges. He looked like death. His face was white in the moonlight, his eyes black holes of fury. The tattoo at his neck seemed to pulse with each beat of his heart. Or perhaps that was Zara's imagination, her fear giving life to ink. Mr. Han. Park Jin-ho's smile did not falter. I know what you were doing. Seojun's voice was quiet. Deadly quiet. The kind of quiet that preceded explosions. Return to your post. We will discuss this tomorrow. Park Jin-ho hesitated, just for a moment, just long enough for something ugly to flicker across his face. Then he bowed and walked away. Silence descended. Zara stood frozen, her arms still burning where Park Jin-ho had gripped her. Seojun did not approach. He stood in the shadows, his hands clenched at his sides, his breathing carefully controlled. Did he hurt you? No. He touched you. He grabbed my arm. That's all. Seojun made a sound, something between a laugh and a snarl. That's all. He finally moved, walking toward her with that predator's grace. He put his hands on you. He threatened you. And you say, that's all, as though it means nothing. What would you have me say? I would have you tell me the truth. He stopped in front of her, close enough that she could see the fury burning in his eyes. I would have you stop pretending that you don't know what's happening. That you don't understand what he is. What is he? Seojun's jaw tightened. A weapon. Aimed at me. By people who want what I have. And what do you have? His eyes dropped to her face. More, he said softly, than I realized. The cold seemed to intensify around them. Zara's breath misted in the air between them, mingling with his. You should send me away, she whispered. I know. If I'm a weakness, if people can use me against you. I know. Then why don't you? He raised his hand. This time he did not hover. His fingers touched her cheek, warm against the cold, gentle despite the violence she knew they were capable of. Because I am selfish, he said. Because I have spent my entire life denying myself anything that might matter to me, and now? His thumb traced her cheekbone. Now I find I cannot let go. Somewhere in the mansion a light turned on. A window somewhere above them illuminated, casting a square of gold across the frozen garden. Seojun's hand dropped. Go inside, he said. Lock your door. Tomorrow I will deal with Park Jin-ho. What are you going to do? His smile was a terrible thing, beautiful and deadly, promising violence that had no name. What I do best. He turned and walked back toward the mansion. Zara watched him go, her cheeks still burning from his touch, her heart beating with a rhythm that felt like a countdown. Park Jin-ho disappeared the next morning. Mrs. Kwon announced his departure during the staff meeting. A brief, clinical statement about personal matters and immediate reassignment. No one asked questions. No one ever asked questions. But Zara saw the way the other staff members avoided the West Wing that day, The way their faces went pale when they passed the security office. The way the cleaning crew spent 3 hours in a room that usually took 30 minutes. She did not ask what they were cleaning. He did not want to know. Han Seojun was different after that. Something had shifted in him. Some final barrier crumbled. He no longer pretended not to watch her. He no longer manufactured distance between them. When she entered a room, his eyes found her immediately. When she passed him in the hallways, he would stop, just for a moment, just long enough for their shoulders to almost brush. When she cleaned his study, he stayed. "You're making this difficult," she said one afternoon, trying to dust around him as he sat motionless at his desk. "Making what difficult?" "My job. My everything." He did not respond. She turned to face him. He was watching her with that intensity that made her skin burn. The focused attention of a man who had made his fortune by noticing what others missed. "You should look away," she said. "I should do many things. Looking away from you is not one I'm capable of anymore. This is impossible." "Yes. It cannot happen. It's already happening." He rose from his chair, moving around the desk with slow, deliberate steps. "It happened the moment you knelt at my feet with that broken crane in your hands. It happened when you looked at me, really looked at me for the first time. It happened." He stopped in front of her. "It's been happening every day since, whether I wanted it to or not." She dropped the duster. Neither of them moved to pick it up. "What do you want from me?" Her voice was barely above a whisper. "Everything." The word hung between them, heavy, impossible, irresistible. "I can't give you everything." "I know." His hand rose, hovering at her waist. "That's what makes this unbearable." "Then stop." "I can't." His voice cracked on the words. "Don't you understand? I've tried. Every day I tell myself to send you away. To end this before it destroys us both. And every day." His hand settled on her waist, tentative, gentle, as though she might shatter at his touch. "Every day I find a new reason to keep you." The door opened. Mrs. Kwon stood in the threshold, her face betraying nothing. "Sir, the Kim representatives are here." Seojun's hand remained on Zara's waist for one moment longer, long enough to feel like defiance, long enough to feel like a claim. Then he stepped back. "Tell them I'll be there in 5 minutes." "Sir." 5 minutes, Mrs. Kwon." She retreated. The door closed. Seojun turned back to Zara. "Tonight," he said. "After midnight. Meet me in the garden." "That's not a good idea." "No. It's a terrible idea." His smile was crooked, almost boyish. The first time she had ever seen him look young. "I've been having a lot of those lately. If someone sees us, the cameras in the garden will be offline. I'll make sure of it. And the guards will be occupied elsewhere." He reached out, tucking a strand of braided hair behind her ear. "Trust me," he said. The word should have been laughable. Instead it felt like a promise. The garden at midnight was a different world. Frost glittered on every surface, turning the skeletal trees into sculptures of ice. The moon hung full and bright overhead, painting everything in shades of silver and shadow. Zara waited by the stone fountain, her breath misting in the cold air. She had changed out of her uniform, wearing instead the only nice dress she owned, a simple blue thing that her mother had given her before she left Lagos. He felt ridiculous. He felt terrified. She felt alive in a way she had not felt in years. He emerged from the shadows like a creature made of darkness. His usual suits had been abandoned. He wore simple black, a sweater that clung to his shoulders, trousers that emphasized his long legs. The tattoo at his neck was fully visible, curving down toward his collarbone. He stopped when he saw her. His breath caught, she heard it, saw the visible jerk of his chest. "You came. You asked me to." "I didn't think." He stopped himself. Started again. "You look cold." A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "Beautiful. You look beautiful." He crossed the distance between them slowly, as though giving her time to flee. She did not flee. He stopped in front of her, close enough to touch, close enough that she could see the moonlight reflected in his dark eyes. "I need to tell you something," he said. "All right. About who I am. What I've done. The world I belong to." His jaw tightened. "You deserve to know what you're getting into before." "Before what?" His hand rose, hovering at her waist again. Before I stop being able to let you go. They walked the garden paths together while he talked. He told her about his childhood, raised in a world of violence and power, trained from birth to take his father's place. He told her about the blood on his hands, the lives he had taken, the things he had done in the name of empire. He told her about the woman who had betrayed him 10 years ago, a lover who had sold his secrets to his enemies, who had nearly destroyed everything he had built. I closed myself off after that, he said, his voice distant. Told myself that feeling anything was weakness. That wanting someone was the same as handing them a weapon to use against you. And now. He stopped walking. They stood beneath a willow tree, its frozen branches creating a curtain around them. Now I find that I would rather be weak than spend another day pretending you don't exist. She should have walked away. Every rational part of her brain screamed that this was madness, that he was dangerous, that this world would devour her, that she was setting herself up for destruction. But then he looked at her. And in his eyes she saw something she had never expected to see in Han Seo-jun. Fear. He was afraid of her. Afraid of what she made him feel. Afraid of the power she held over him without even knowing it. Afraid that she would reject him, that she would see the monster beneath the mask and run. I'm not going anywhere, she said. His eyes widened. You should. Probably. She reached up, her fingers brushing the edge of his jaw. But I've never been very good at doing what I should. He kissed her like a man drowning. His hands cradled her face, gentle despite their strength. His lips moved against hers, tentative at first, then hungry, then desperate. She felt the tremble in his body, the carefully maintained control finally shattering beneath the weight of months of suppressed desire. She felt herself shattering too. When they finally broke apart, his forehead resting against hers, both of them breathing hard, she saw something extraordinary. He was crying. Silent tears tracking down his cheeks, glittering in the moonlight like diamonds on stone. Seo-jun. I forgot, he whispered. I forgot what this felt like. Being touched by someone who doesn't want anything from me except you. He closed his eyes. His arms wrapped around her, pulling her against his chest, holding her as though she might disappear. This changes everything, he said into her hair. You understand that? The moment anyone realizes what you mean to me. I know. They will try to use you, hurt you, kill you if they think it will break me. I know. And still you stay? She pulled back just enough to look at him, to see his face, his fear, his desperate hope. Still I stay. The moon had moved across the sky by the time they returned to the mansion. He walked her to her room through the service corridors, his hand never leaving hers. At her door he stopped. Tomorrow, he said. Everything changes tomorrow. What do you mean? I mean I'm done hiding. His eyes were clear now, the tears dried, replaced by something fierce and determined. You are not my secret. You are not my weakness. You are mine, and the world is going to know it. He kissed her forehead. Sleep, he said. I'll handle everything else. He disappeared into the shadows. Zara leaned against her door, her heart pounding, her lips still burning from his kiss. For the first time in months she fell asleep without nightmares. She woke to screaming. The sound tore through the mansion, raw and terrible, coming from somewhere in the depths of the house. Zara was on her feet before she was fully conscious, her door thrown open, her bare feet slapping against the cold floor. The hallways were chaos. Staff members ran in all directions, their faces white with terror. Security guards shouted. Orders that no one followed. Somewhere an alarm was blaring. What's happening? Zara grabbed Young-hee's arm as she ran past. What's going on? Young-hee's eyes were wild. It's Mr. Han, she gasped. Someone poisoned him. He collapsed during the morning meeting. They think he's... She couldn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Zara ran. Through the service corridors, up the forbidden stairs, into the west wing she had never been allowed to enter. Guards shouted at her, tried to stop her, but something in her face made them step aside. She found him in his office. He was on the floor, surrounded by men in expensive suits, his body convulsing violently. Foam flecked his lips. His eyes had rolled back, showing only white. Seo-jun. She dropped to her knees beside him, her hands finding his face. What happened? What did they give him? Get her out of here, one of the men snarled. No. A voice she recognized. Dr. Kim, the physician who had examined her during her hiring process. She stays. He's been asking for her. He's delirious. He's been saying her name for the past 10 minutes. He asked for her before he lost consciousness. Dr. Kim's face was grim. If you want him to survive, you'll let her stay. The next hours were a blur of terror. Zara held Seo-jun's hand as they pumped his stomach, as they administered antidotes, as they fought to keep his heart beating. She did not cry. He could not afford to cry. Instead, she talked to him, quiet words she would not remember later, stories about her childhood in Lagos, about her father's laugh, about the smell of her mother's cooking. She talked until her voice was raw, until the sun set and rose again, until Dr. Kim finally told her, "He's stable. The worst is over." Seo-jun opened his eyes 3 days later. The first thing he saw was Zara, asleep in the chair beside his bed, her hands still wrapped around his. The second thing he saw was the tattoo on his wrist, the chains his father had marked him with now seeming heavier than ever. The third thing he saw was the memory of Park Jin-ho's smile. "Find him," he rasped. The guards who had been stationed at the door snapped to attention. "Sir. Park Jin-ho. He didn't leave. He's still here. Find him. Sir, Park Jin-ho is dead. You ordered." It was staged. Seo-jun's voice was stronger now, fury burning through the weakness. "He's alive. He's been here the whole time. He's the one who poisoned me." Zara's eyes flew open. "Seo-jun. He was in my study that morning. He poured my tea." Seo-jun's grip on her hand tightened. "He was the weapon all along. And I let him get close because I was distracted." His eyes found hers. "Because I was thinking about you instead of watching my back." The search took 4 hours. They found Park Jin-ho in the basement, or rather in the hidden room beneath the basement, the one that wasn't supposed to exist. He was not alone. 3 members of the Kim faction were with him, gathered around a table covered in documents. Documents about the Han Empire. Documents about Seo-jun's weaknesses. Documents about Zara. Seo-jun watched the interrogation from his bed, via the cameras he had installed throughout the mansion. Zara sat beside him, their hands still intertwined. On the screen, Park Jin-ho smiled that empty smile even as they broke him piece by piece. "The Kim faction wants you dead," he said conversationally, as though discussing the weather. "But they knew they couldn't kill you outright. You're too careful. Too paranoid. Too smart. So they sent you. So they sent me. To find your weakness. To get close to you. To make you vulnerable." His smile widened. "And then you went and handed me everything I needed." The great Han Seo-jun brought low by a maid. Seo-jun's hand tightened on Zara's. "She is not my weakness. Isn't she?" Park Jin-ho laughed. "I've watched the footage, Mr. Han. I've seen the way you look at her. The way you follow her around like a lovesick boy. She made you careless. She made you human. And human." He leaned forward. "Human can be killed." The screen went dark. Zara did not ask what happened next. He did not want to know. "You should leave," Seo-jun said into the silence. Zara's heart stopped. "What? This world, my world, it will destroy you." He would not look at her. Park Jin-ho was right. "Being close to me makes you a target. If the Kim faction can't get to me directly, they'll go through you. They'll hurt you to hurt me. And leaving will protect me?" "Yes." "You're lying." He finally looked at her. His eyes were dark with pain. Pain from the poison still working its way out of his system, pain from the truth he was trying to hide. "They already know about you," she said. "Sending me away won't make them forget. They'll just come for me somewhere else, somewhere you can't protect me. I can't protect you here either." "Yes, you can." She leaned forward, gripping his face in her hands. "You already have. You survived, Seo-jun. Against all odds, against their best efforts, you survived. And you'll keep surviving. We'll keep surviving. Together. You don't understand. Then make me understand." He closed his eyes. "I'm not a good man, Zara. The things I've done, the things I'm going to do to the people who hurt me, you don't want to be part of that world." "You're right. I don't want to be part of that world." She brushed her thumb across his cheekbone. "But I want to be part of yours. If that means accepting the darkness, then I accept it. Why? The question was raw, broken. The voice of a man who had never been loved unconditionally. Because you're worth it, she said simply. Because underneath all the control and the violence and the fear, there's a man who cried in the moonlight when I kissed him. A man who looks at me like I'm the first real thing he's seen in years. A man who... She leaned closer. A man I love. Hyojun made a sound, something between a sob and a laugh. His arms wrapped around her, pulling her onto the bed beside him, holding her against his chest with a desperation that bordered on painful. Say it again. I love you. Again. I love you, Han Seojun. With all the darkness. With all the danger. With everything. He kissed her forehead. Her cheeks. The corner of her mouth. I don't deserve you. Probably not. A broken laugh escaped him. Stay, he whispered against her lips. Please. Stay. Always. Outside the window, the first light of dawn painted the sky in shades of gold and rose. Inside the mansion the serpents still slithered. But for this moment, this brief, precious moment, there was only the two of them. Broken people finding wholeness in each other. It would not last. Could not last. But oh, how beautiful it was while it did. Recovery was slow. The poison had damaged something in Seojun's liver, something that required rest and medication and patience. 3 things he had never been good at. But Zara made him patient. She stayed by his side through the long days of forced bed rest, reading to him from books he chose, Korean poetry, business journals, surprisingly romance novels. She brought him meals that she had learned to prepare herself, studying under the chef until she could make his favorite dishes. She slept in the chair beside his bed every night, despite his protests that the bed was large enough for both of them. Not yet, she always said with a smile that made his heart ache. When you're better. The promise of that when was enough to make him fight. But outside the sickroom the world continued to turn. The Kim faction grew bolder in their moves against the Han Empire. Business partners who had been loyal for decades suddenly developed concerns about their arrangements. Shipments went missing. Money disappeared from accounts that should have been untraceable. And everywhere whispers. Whispers about Han Seojun's weakness. About the foreign maid who had brought the great man to his knees. About the opportunity that his distraction represented. You need to make a statement, his second-in-command said during one of their briefings, held in the sickroom now, much to Seojun's displeasure. The empire is destabilizing. People need to see you. I'm recovering from being poisoned. Exactly. You're recovering. You're not dead. They tried to kill you and failed. The man leaned forward. That's a story of strength if you spin it right. And how do you suggest I spin it? The charity gala next month. It's still happening, yes. Seojun's jaw tightened. The annual event. Yes. Perfect. You make your first public appearance there. You show them you're stronger than ever. And you? He hesitated. And I what? You bring the girl. Seojun's response was immediate and violent. No. Sir. She is not a prop. She is not a display piece. She will not be paraded in front of my enemies like. She already is. The second-in-command's voice was quiet, careful. She already is a part of this, sir. Whether you acknowledge it publicly or not. The Kim faction knows about her. Our allies know about her. The only people who don't know are the general public, and ignorance won't protect them. I won't put her at risk. She's already at risk. The only question is whether you meet that risk with your head down or your chin up. Silence. Seojun turned to look at Zara, who had been sitting quietly in the corner throughout the briefing. What do you think? She met his gaze steadily. I think he's right. Her agreement surprised him. You understand what you're saying. What being seen with me publicly would mean. I understand. You would become a target. Even more than you already are. Every enemy I have would know your face. Your name. Your value to me. Yes. And you still want to do this? She rose from her chair and crossed to him, to the bed where he lay, still weak, still fighting to regain the strength that had always defined him. She took his hand. I want to stand beside you, she said. Not behind you. Not hidden away. Beside you where everyone can see that your love is not your weakness. His breath caught. It is though. You are my weakness. You are the only thing in this world that could truly destroy me. Then let's make sure they never get the chance. The gala was 3 weeks away. 3 weeks of preparations that transformed the mansion into a hive of activity. Decorators, caterers, security teams, and public relations specialists swarmed through the halls, turning the grand ballroom into something from a fairy tale. 3 weeks of Seo-jun regaining his strength, pushing himself through physical therapy and business meetings and long nights reviewing the security arrangements. 3 weeks of Zara preparing for the moment that would change everything. Mrs. Kwon approached her 2 days before the event, her expression as severe as ever, but with something new beneath it. Respect, perhaps. Mr. Han has requested that you be fitted for a gown. Zara looked up from the linens she was folding. I'm still a staff member, Mrs. Kwon. I can fold my own. You are the master's chosen companion. You will dress accordingly. There was no arguing with that tone. The fitting took place in a room Zara had never entered, a dressing suite on the 3rd floor, filled with mirrors and light, and 3 women from a designer house whose name Zara recognized from magazine covers. They measured her. They draped her in fabric swatches. They debated colors and cuts and silhouettes while she stood still and tried not to feel like a doll being dressed by children. When they finally unveiled the finished product, she understood. The gown was gold, not garish gold but warm and subtle, the color of autumn leaves and candlelight. It flowed over her curves like water, fitted at the bodice, flowing at the skirt, leaving her shoulders bare. She looked like a queen. He felt like a fraud. You're beautiful. She turned from the mirror to find Seo-jun in the doorway. He was dressed simply, dark trousers, a white shirt rolled at the sleeves, the tattoo on his forearm visible. His face was still pale from the weeks of recovery, but his eyes devoured her. It's too much, she said. I'm a maid. People will laugh. Let them laugh. He crossed the room in 3 strides, his hands finding her waist, pulling her against him. Let them laugh while they choke on their envy. Seo-jun. You are magnificent. His voice was rough. And tomorrow the world is going to know it. That night they sat together in the garden. Their garden now, the place where everything had truly begun. The moon was hidden behind clouds, but the security lights painted everything in gold. Are you afraid? She asked. Terrified. Of the gala? Of losing you? He pulled her closer, her back against his chest, his arms wrapped around her waist. Everything I have, the money, the power, the empire, it means nothing without you. And tomorrow I'm putting you in the crosshairs. I'm already in the crosshairs. I know. That's what terrifies me. She turned in his arms, facing him. Then trust me. Trust us. We've survived this far. Have we? His smile was sad. Or have we just been lucky? Lucky then. And we'll keep being lucky. You sound very confident. One of us has to be. He laughed. A real laugh, the kind she had only heard a handful of times. Then he kissed her. And for a long, sweet moment, the fear disappeared. They returned to the mansion just before midnight. At her door he stopped, as he always stopped, as he had stopped every night since the poisoning. Stay, she said. His eyes widened. Zara. Stay. She took his hand, pulling him into her room. Whatever happens tomorrow, I want tonight. I want you. Are you sure? I've never been more sure of anything. She kissed him. And this time he did not pull away. The door closes behind them, leaving their private moments shrouded in the intimate darkness. Morning came too quickly. Zara woke to find Seo-jun already gone, the sheets beside her still warm, a single white rose on the pillow where his head had rested. She pressed her face into that pillow, breathing in the scent of him. Then she rose to face the day. The mansion was chaos. Staff members ran in all directions, carrying flowers and table settings and equipment she couldn't identify. Security personnel conducted final sweeps, their faces grim with concentration. Somewhere music played, the orchestra warming up in the ballroom. Zara moved through it all like a ghost. She was not a maid today. She was something else entirely. The makeup artist descended at noon. They spent 3 hours on her face, her hair, her nails, transforming her from a beautiful woman into something unearthly. Her braids were styled into an elaborate crown, threaded with gold wire that caught the light. Her makeup was subtle but striking, emphasizing her cheekbones and the rich darkness of her eyes. When she looked in the mirror, she barely recognized herself. Seojun found her in the dressing room just before the guests began arriving. He was in his own armor now, a suit so perfectly tailored it looked like it had grown on him. The dark fabric made his pale face seem carved from marble, his eyes bottomless pits of shadow. The tattoo at his wrist was partially visible beneath his cuff. He had done that deliberately, she knew. Let them see what I am. Let them remember. Ready? He asked. No. Neither am I. He offered his hand. Shall we? He took it. Together they walked toward the ballroom. The noise hit her first, hundreds of voices echoing off crystal chandeliers, the clink of glasses, the swell of orchestral music. Then the silence. It started near the entrance and spread outward like a wave, conversation dying as faces turned toward the doorway. Toward Han Seojun and the woman on his arm. Zara felt their eyes like physical weight. The curiosity. The jealousy. The calculation. She lifted her chin. She had faced worse than a room full of rich people with too many opinions. Seojun guided her through the crowd, stopping to greet guests, to exchange meaningless pleasantries, to play the role of gracious host. But his hand never left hers. And whenever she felt the weight of judgment pressing too hard, she found his eyes, dark and steady and burning with something that made her feel invincible. The Kim faction representatives arrived at 8 o'clock. 3 of them, middle-aged men in suits that cost more than Zara's education. They greeted Seojun with false warmth and calculated smiles. Their eyes slid over Zara like she was furniture. Mr. Han. So good to see you recovered. Thank you for your concern. Seojun's voice was ice. I trust the matter of Park Jin-ho has been settled? An unfortunate misunderstanding. Rogue agents acting without authorization. You understand. I understand perfectly. Tension crackled between them like lightning. Then one of the representatives, the oldest, the one with gray at his temples and cruelty in his eyes, turned to Zara. And this must be the famous Maid. I confess I expected less. Did you? The words left her mouth before she could stop them. The representative's eyes narrowed. Interesting, he said. Very interesting. I see why you're so attached, Mr. Han. She has spirit. She has many things. Seojun's hand tightened on hers. None of which concern you. Everything concerns us, Mr. Han. That's the nature of our relationship. He smiled. It was the smile of a snake before it strikes. Enjoy your evening. He walked away. That could have gone better, Zara murmured. That could have gone much worse. Seojun guided her toward the edge of the room, toward the relative privacy of a balcony overlooking the garden. You surprised them. They expected you to be afraid. I am afraid. You didn't show it. That's all that matters. The balcony was cold. Zara wrapped her arms around herself, the gold gown offering no protection from the winter air. Seojun shrugged off his jacket and draped it over her shoulders. The gesture was so unexpected, so unexpectedly tender, that she felt tears prick her eyes. Thank you. Don't thank me. He leaned against the railing, looking out at the frozen garden. I should be thanking you. For coming tonight. For standing beside me. For being. He trailed off. Being what? Brave. He turned to face her. Braver than I've ever been. That's not true. It is. His hand found her cheek. I've spent my whole life hiding from anything that could hurt me. Building walls. Creating distance. And you. His thumb brushed away a tear she hadn't realized had fallen. You make me want to tear those walls down. The explosion came at 9:15. Zara heard it before she felt it. A roar of sound that shattered the windows of the ballroom and sent glass flying like shrapnel. Seojun grabbed her, pulling her down, covering her body with his. Stay down, he shouted over the screaming. Stay down. But she could see over his shoulder, could see the flames licking at the ballroom ceiling, could see the guests stampeding toward exits, could see men in tactical gear pouring through the broken windows. And leading them, his smile as empty as ever. Park Jin-ho. Impossible, Seojun breathed. I saw the body. Body double. Park Jin-ho's voice carried across the chaos, amplified by some kind of speaker system. Your intelligence network is getting sloppy, Mr. Han. Or perhaps you've just been distracted. His eyes found Zara. Hello again, Miss Adeyemi. I told you we'd meet again. Seojun pushed Zara behind him. Run, he said. Get to the safe room. You know where it is. I'm not leaving you. This isn't a discussion. Run. But Park Jin-ho was faster. His men surrounded them in seconds, cutting off any escape. Zara found herself pressed against Seojun's back, his body the only barrier between her and the armed soldiers. Touching, Park Jin-ho said. Really? The great Han Seojun reduced to human shield. How the mighty have fallen. What do you want? What I've always wanted. The empire. The power. Everything you've spent your life building. Park Jin-ho's smile widened. And I'll get it, Mr. Han. One way or another. The only question is how much you're willing to lose first. His eyes slid to Zara. Starting with her. Seojun moved. He moved faster than Zara had ever seen a human being move. His body becoming a blur of violence as he engaged the nearest soldiers. She watched him fight with a kind of horrified fascination, watched the elegant businessman transform into something primal and deadly. But there were too many of them. A soldier grabbed her arm, yanking her away from the chaos. She screamed. Seojun heard her scream. Cut through the noise of combat like a blade through silk. Turned. And Park Jin-ho's blade found his side. Zara saw him fall. She saw the blood, so much blood spreading across his white shirt, dripping onto the marble floor. She saw Park Jin-ho standing over him, that empty smile twisting into something like triumph. Take her, Park Jin-ho said. Leave him. Let him bleed. The soldiers dragged her toward the broken windows. Her last sight was of Seojun, crumpled on the floor, his hand reaching toward her as if he could somehow bridge the growing distance between them. Then darkness swallowed her. He lies bleeding on the ballroom floor. She disappears into the night. The empire burns. And somewhere in the darkness a choice is being made, one that will determine whether love can truly survive the shadows, or whether some flames are simply too dark to escape. Blood pooled beneath him like a dark mirror. Han Seojun lay on the marble floor of his ruined ballroom, surrounded by shattered crystal and the distant screams of fleeing guests. The chandelier above him swung on its chain, fractured, casting broken light across the devastation. He could feel the wound in his side, a burning, pulsing agony that radiated outward with every heartbeat. The blade had gone deep. Not deep enough to kill immediately. Deep enough to make every breath feel like drowning. But the physical pain was nothing. Nothing compared to the silence where her voice should have been. He turned his head, pressing his cheek against the cold marble, and stared at the shattered windows through which they had taken her. Gone. She was gone. Sir, can you hear me? Hands on his shoulders. Voices shouting. The sound of boots on broken glass. His security team, what remained of it, swarmed around him. Someone pressed fabric against the wound in his side. Someone else was speaking rapidly into a phone. Get Dr. Kim. No. He's losing blood. Sir, stay with us. Zara. The word came out as a whisper, barely audible above the chaos. Sir. Find her. He gripped the nearest man's arm with a strength that should have been impossible given the blood he was losing. Find her or I will burn this city to the ground. The man's face went white. Yes, sir. Dr. Kim arrived 17 minutes later. 17 minutes that felt like 17 lifetimes. Seojun drifted in and out of consciousness, his mind fracturing between the present. The pain, the urgency, the cold marble beneath his back, and memories that surfaced unbidden. Adeyemi. Zara's laugh in the garden. The warmth of her hand in his. The way she had said, I love you, like it was the simplest truth in the world. The way she had screamed his name as they dragged her away. The blade missed the kidney by centimeters, Dr. Kim said, his hands working with practiced efficiency. You're lucky. Lucky, Seojun repeated. The word tasted like ash. You need surgery. A hospital. No hospital. Fix it here. Sir, the damage. Fix. Here. Dr. Kim hesitated. Then nodded. This is going to hurt. Good. Seojun's eyes were open now, staring at the ruined ceiling with an intensity that made the doctor flinch. I need to feel something. The surgery took 3 hours. No anesthesia. Seo-jun refused anything that would dull his mind, that would prevent him from receiving updates as his men searched the city. He lay on the dining room table, the same table where he had eaten alone for years before Zara came, and stared at the ceiling while Dr. Kim stitched him back together. Every 20 minutes his second-in-command appeared with updates. We've traced the vehicles. 3 black SUVs heading south toward Incheon. They've abandoned the SUVs. Switched to unmarked sedans. We're checking traffic cameras. We've identified the soldiers. Private military contractors. Korean nationals with ties to the Kim faction's outer circle. We've lost the trail. That last update broke something. Seo-jun sat up on the table, ripping the 4 from his arm, ignoring Dr. Kim's shouted protests. What do you mean lost? The sedans entered a dead zone near the port. No cameras, no surveillance. Our people on the ground found the vehicles abandoned. No sign of Park Jin-ho. No sign of... Say her name. The second-in-command swallowed. No sign of Miss Adeyemi. Seo-jun stood. The wound screamed. Blood seeped through the fresh bandages. His vision swam. He did not care. Call everyone, he said. His voice was quiet, that terrible quiet that preceded violence. Every contact. Every asset. Every person who has ever owed us anything. I want every port, every airport, every train station watched. I want every member of the Kim faction brought in for questioning. I want Park Jin-ho's face on every screen in Seoul. Sir, your condition. I want her found. He grabbed the man's collar, pulling him close. I want her found. Alive and unharmed, and I want every person who touched her delivered to me. Alive. His eyes burned. Do you understand me? Yes, sir. Then move. Zara woke in darkness. Complete darkness. The kind that pressed against her eyes like fabric, that made her wonder for a terrifying moment whether she had gone blind. She was lying on concrete. Cold concrete, rough against her bare arms where the gold gown had torn. Her wrists were bound behind her back with zip ties that bit into her skin. She could hear water dripping somewhere. The distant hum of machinery. The creaking of metal in wind. A warehouse, she guessed. Near the port, based on the salt smell that permeated everything. She lay still and breathed and tried to think. The gold gown was ruined. Torn at the shoulder, stained with blood that might have been hers or might have been Seo-jun's. The fabric that had made her feel like a queen now felt like a shroud. Seo-jun. The image of him falling hit her like a physical blow. His body crumpling, the blood spreading across his white shirt, his hand reaching for her. Was he alive? Was he dead? She pressed her forehead against the cold concrete and forced herself not to scream. Footsteps. A door opened somewhere above her, flooding the space with harsh fluorescent light. She squeezed her eyes shut against the sudden brightness, then forced them open. She was in a basement. Industrial, empty except for a metal chair bolted to the floor and the pipes that ran along the ceiling. Stairs led up to a door where a figure stood silhouetted against the light. Park Jin-ho descended slowly. His smile was the same as always, perfect, empty, designed. Miss Adeyemi. Welcome to your new accommodations. I apologize for the lack of luxury. I know you've grown accustomed to better things. She said nothing. He crouched in front of her. You're wondering if he's alive. So she said nothing. He is. For now. Park Jin-ho tilted his head. The wound was deep but not fatal. I know anatomy well enough to avoid the major organs. I needed him alive. Suffering but alive. Why? The word escaped before she could stop it. Because dead men don't negotiate. And I need Han Seo-jun to negotiate. He explained it with the casual precision of a businessman presenting quarterly earnings. The Kim faction wanted the Han Empire's financial infrastructure. The network of banks, shell companies and investment vehicles that Seo-jun had built over 2 decades. Together they represented one of the most sophisticated money laundering operations in Asia. Worth billions, Park Jin-ho said. And all of it locked behind encryption that only Seo-jun can access. So you need him alive to get the codes. Smart girl. I always thought you were too intelligent to be scrubbing floors. And I'm what? Leverage. You're the only leverage that works. Park Jin-ho stood, brushing dust from his trousers. I've studied him for months. His organization, his finances, his psychology. The man has no weaknesses. No family he cares about. No friends. No vulnerabilities of any kind. He looked down at her. Until you. Time became meaningless in the basement. Zara had no watch, no window, no way to track the hours. She counted heartbeats instead, measured the intervals between Park Jin-ho's visits, between the meals that were delivered by silent soldiers who refused to meet her eyes. She slept on the concrete floor. She dreamed of gardens and moonlight and the warmth of Seo-jun's hands. She woke to cold and darkness and the growing certainty that she was running out of time. On what she believed was the second day, she began to plan. The zip ties were tight but not impossible. She had learned in Lagos, from a cousin who worked in security, that certain plastic bindings could be broken with enough force applied at the right angle. She twisted her wrists, testing the limits. Pain lanced through her arms. He kept twisting. Park Jin-ho visited again on what might have been the third day. He was agitated this time, the smooth mask cracking slightly to reveal something ugly underneath. Your boyfriend is being difficult. He's not my boyfriend. No? Then what is he? She met his eyes steadily. He's the man who's going to kill you. Park Jin-ho laughed. But there was no humor in it. He received our demands 6 hours ago. Complete transfer of the financial codes in exchange for your safe return. He pulled a phone from his pocket, showing her the screen. His response was unhelpful. The screen showed a text message. 3 words in Korean. Zara could not read Korean, but she recognized the characters for one word. Blood. He's threatened to dismantle the entire Kim faction. Every member, every associate, every family connection. Complete annihilation. Park Jin-ho's jaw tightened. He's not negotiating. He's declaring war. Did you expect anything less? I expected him to be rational. To weigh the cost-benefit analysis. To recognize that one woman's life is not worth. That's where you made your mistake. Zara's voice was quiet, steady, surprising even herself. You studied his business, his finances, his psychology, but you didn't understand the one thing that matters. And what's that? He's not rational when it comes to me. He never was. Park Jin-ho stared at her for a long moment. Then he turned and walked up the stairs. The door slammed behind him. In the darkness, Zara twisted her wrists against the zip ties and bit down on her lip to keep from crying out. The plastic was weakening. She just needed more time. Seoul burned. Not literally, though by the end of the first week, 3 Kim faction properties had been reduced to ash. But the city's underworld burned with a fear unlike anything it had experienced in decades. Han Seo-jun was hunting. And the predator had never been more dangerous. He operated from the mansion's war room, a space in the West Wing that most staff members did not know existed. Walls covered in screens, tables buried in documents, the constant hum of encrypted communications. His wound had not fully healed. Dr. Kim had warned him that the stitches could tear, that the internal damage needed time, that pushing himself would cause permanent harm. Seo-jun had listened. Then he had stood up and walked to the war room and had not left since. He did not sleep. Mrs. Kwon brought food that he did not eat. Dr. Kim administered medications that he accepted only because they kept him functional. His lieutenants reported every hour with updates that were never enough. 3 days. 3 days since they had taken her. 3 days of methodical, systematic destruction of every organization connected to the Kim faction. Every business. Every bank account. Every safe house. He dismantled them piece by piece the way a surgeon removes a tumor. Precisely, without hesitation, without mercy. On the 4th day they found the first clue. A traffic camera near Incheon port had captured an image. Grainy, distant, but unmistakable. A woman in a torn gold dress being led into a warehouse by armed men. Seo-jun stared at the image for a long time. His hand trembled against the desk. The tattoo on his wrist, waves or flames or bloodline, seemed to darken in the harsh light of the screens. How old is this footage? 3 days, sir. She was alive 3 days ago. Yes, sir. He closed his eyes. When he opened them, the man who had replaced Park Jin-ho as head of security took an involuntary step backward. There was nothing human left in those eyes. Only purpose. Mobilize everyone, Seo-jun said. Every team. Every asset. I want that warehouse surrounded within the hour. Sir, it could be a trap. It is a trap. Park Jin-ho wants me to come. He's been waiting for me to find her. Then shouldn't we? I'm going. Sir. I said I'm going. He rose from his chair and the room fell silent. Anyone who wants to stop me is welcome to try. No one moved. No one breathed. Get me my coat. The convoy departed at midnight. 6 vehicles, armored, darkened, moving through Seoul's empty streets like a funeral procession. Seo-jun sat in the lead car, his face illuminated by the screen of the tactical display, his hands resting on his thighs. He was calm now. The fury had burned through him and left something colder behind. Something focused and sharp and infinitely more dangerous than rage. He knew what was waiting for him. He knew the risks. He knew that Park Jin-ho had prepared for exactly this scenario. He did not care. The warehouse district near Incheon Port was a labyrinth of corrugated metal and concrete. They parked 3 blocks out, continuing on foot through the maze of shipping containers and abandoned buildings. The salt wind cut through Seo-jun's coat, finding the wound in his side and twisting. He ignored it. He ignored everything except the building ahead. A massive structure, dark except for a single light on the ground floor. A light left on deliberately. An invitation. Sir, his lieutenant whispered. Thermal imaging shows 12 hostiles inside. 2 on the roof. 4 at ground level. 6 below. And her. 1 heat signature in the basement. Stationary. Alive. He was alive. The relief nearly brought him to his knees. I go in first. Sir, that's suicide. I go in first. The teams enter from the north and east simultaneously, 30 seconds after I breach the front entrance. Why 30 seconds? Because that's how long it will take Park Jin-ho to realize he's lost. He walked through the front door alone. No weapon drawn. No armor. Just a man in a dark coat, his tattoo visible at his wrist, his footsteps echoing through the empty warehouse like the ticking of a clock. Park Jin-ho was waiting. He stood in the center of the ground floor, surrounded by his men, soldiers in tactical gear, weapons trained on the doorway. He smiled when he saw Seo-jun. You came alone. I came first. Seo-jun stopped 20 feet away. The alone part was optional. Still arrogant. Park Jin-ho shook his head. Even now. Even bleeding. Even with her life in my hands. Where is she? Below us. Safe. For the moment. Park Jin-ho's smile thinned. The codes, Mr. Han. The financial network. Transfer everything and she walks out of here. And if I refuse? Park Jin-ho pulled a phone from his pocket, pressing a button. A speaker crackled. The Tsar's voice. Don't do it. Seo-jun's composure shattered. Just for a moment. Just long enough for the mask to slip, for the raw desperation underneath to show through. His breath caught. His hands clenched at his sides. The tendons in his neck stood out like cables. Seo-jun. Her voice was steady through the speaker. Don't give him anything. Whatever happens to me. Be quiet, Park Jin-ho said into the phone. Then to Seo-jun, you hear her? She's brave. Stupid but brave. How long do you think that bravery lasts, Mr. Han? How long before? 23 seconds. Park Jin-ho blinked. What? That's how long you have before my teams breach this building from every entrance simultaneously. 23 seconds to decide whether you want to die quickly or slowly. You're bluffing. Am I? Seo-jun took a step forward. Then another. His eyes never left Park Jin-ho's face. You studied me for months. You watched my routines, my habits, my weaknesses. So tell me, have you ever known me to bluff? Silence. 15 seconds. Park Jin-ho's smile flickered. You're bleeding, he said, his voice less steady now. You can barely stand. Your men are outnumbered. 10 seconds. You'll die here, Seo-jun. You and her both. Then we die together. Seo-jun's voice dropped to a whisper. But you die first. Park Jin-ho's hand moved toward his weapon. He was too slow. The breach was surgical. Seo-jun's teams hit every entrance simultaneously, doors, windows, rooftop access points. The warehouse erupted in controlled chaos. Flash grenades, precision shots, the systematic elimination of every hostile. Park Jin-ho's soldiers were well-trained, but they were mercenaries, fighting for money, not conviction. Seo-jun's men were fighting for something else entirely. In the chaos, Seo-jun descended. He found the basement stairs in the north corner, exactly where the thermal imaging had indicated. The stairs were narrow, lit by a single flickering bulb, the air thick with damp and rust. He took them two at a time. The wound in his side split open. He felt the warmth of fresh blood soaking through his bandages, spreading beneath his shirt. He kept moving. The basement door was locked. He kicked it once, twice. On the third kick, the lock gave way. He was there, sitting on the concrete floor, her back against the wall, the gold dress in tatters around her. Her wrists were raw and bleeding where the zip ties had been. She had freed herself. He realized the broken plastic scattered around her. She was holding a length of pipe, gripped in both hands like a weapon, aimed at the doorway. At him. Their eyes met. Time stopped. Everything he had built, the empire, the fortune, the legend of the man who never lost control, it all meant nothing. Nothing compared to the sight of her, alive and breathing and looking at him with those eyes. "You found me," she whispered. "Always." His voice broke on the word. "I will always find you." The pipe fell from her hands. He crossed the room in 3 steps and caught her as she collapsed against him, her arms around his neck, her face buried in his chest, her body shaking with sobs she had held back for days. He held her so tightly the wound screamed. He did not let go. "You're bleeding," she said, pulling back just enough to see the dark stain spreading across his shirt. "It doesn't matter. It matters to me." She pressed her hand against his side, applying pressure that made him hiss through his teeth. "We need to get out of here," she said. "I know." But neither of them moved. He cradled her face in his hands, studying her, every bruise, every scratch, every sign of the hell she had endured. His thumbs traced her cheekbones, wiping away tears and grime. "Did they hurt you?" "No. Don't lie to me. They didn't hurt me." She covered his hands with hers. "Not the way you're thinking." "Okay. I'm alive." "You're alive," he repeated as though saying it made it more real. "You're alive." "I'm alive." He pressed his forehead against hers. "I thought I'd lost you." "You can't lose me." He kissed his cheek, tasting salt. "I told you. Always." They emerged from the warehouse into a gray dawn. The port was surrounded by Seo-jun's vehicles, the morning mist mingling with the last wisps of smoke from flash grenades. Soldiers moved through the wreckage with military precision, securing prisoners and documenting evidence. Park Jin-ho was among the captured, bound and bleeding, his smile finally gone. Seo-jun paused as they passed him. Zara felt his body tense, every muscle coiling with the desire for violence. She tightened her grip on his hand. "Not now," she whispered. "Take me home." He looked at her. Then he looked away from Park Jin-ho and kept walking. The drive back to Seoul took 40 minutes. Zara slept against Seo-jun's shoulder, exhaustion finally claiming her now that she was safe. He held her with one arm, his other hand pressed against his bleeding side, watching the city wake up through the tinted windows. Dawn painted Seoul in shades of pink and gold. He had seen 1,000 dawns from these streets. None had looked like this. The mansion was quiet when they arrived. The staff lined the entrance hall. Mrs. Kwon, the kitchen girls, the gardeners, the drivers, all watching in silence as Seo-jun carried Zara through the front door. Not the service entrance. The front door. Mrs. Kwon's eyes widened, then softened, then for the first and only time in Zara's experience, glistened with tears. "Prepare her room," Seo-jun said. "Which room, sir?" "Wine." He laid her on his bed, the massive expanse of dark silk and white linen that dominated his private chambers. She stirred as her body sank into the mattress, her eyes opening briefly. "Stay," she murmured. "I'm not going anywhere." Dr. Kim was waiting in the doorway, his medical bag in hand, his face a careful mask of professional concern. "Both of you," he said firmly. "I need to treat both of you." Seo-jun sat on the edge of the bed while the doctor worked, stitching his reopened wound, cleaning Zara's abraded wrists, administering antibiotics and painkillers. He held Zara's hand through all of it. He did not let go. The days that followed were a strange kind of peaceful. The war with the Kim faction continued, but distantly, handled by Seo Jun's lieutenants while their leader recovered. Park Jin-ho was transferred to a facility that did not officially exist. The Kim faction's leadership was systematically dismantled, their assets frozen, their alliances dissolved. But inside the mansion, inside the quiet sanctuary of Seo Jun's private rooms, the world was small and warm and safe. Zara healed. The bruises faded. The raw skin on her wrists scarred over. The nightmares, which came every night for the first week, waking her gasping and clawing at sheets, gradually diminished. Seo Jun was there for every nightmare. He would wake before she did, some sixth sense alerting him to her distress, and pull her close, his arms wrapping around her, his voice murmuring in Korean. She did not understand the words. He did not need to. "What are you saying?" she asked one morning, her cheek pressed against his chest, his heartbeat steady beneath her ear. "When you speak Korean to me, what are you saying?" His hand moved through her braids, gentle and rhythmic. "I'm telling you that you're safe." "In Korean?" "In the only language that feels honest enough." She smiled against his chest. "Teach me." He pressed his lips against the top of her head. "Anjon hei. Safe. Neo nun nayui gioya. You are mine. Sarang hei. I love you." She repeated the words, stumbling over the unfamiliar syllables, laughing at her own pronunciation. He did not laugh. He listened to her speak his language with an expression that was almost reverent. 3 weeks after the rescue, the Kim faction fell. It did not collapse dramatically. There was no final battle, no climactic confrontation. It simply dissolved. Seo Jun dismantled it the way he did everything. Methodically, completely, without mercy. Bank accounts frozen. Properties seized. Leadership arrested on charges that ranged from tax fraud to attempted murder. Their network, built over generations, was erased in weeks. "It's over," Seo Jun's second-in-command reported. "The faction is done." Seo Jun nodded. "And Park Jin-ho?" "Alive. Contained. Awaiting your decision." Seo Jun looked at Zara, who sat across the room reading a book, one of the Korean novels he had been teaching her to decipher, her brow furrowed in concentration, her lips moving silently as she sounded out the characters. She looked up, feeling his gaze. "What?" "Nothing." He turned back to his lieutenant. "Keep him contained. I'll deal with him later." "Yes, sir." The lieutenant left. Zara set down her book. "You're going to kill him." It was not a question. Seo Jun was silent for a long moment. "Would you hate me if I did?" She crossed the room, kneeling in front of his chair, the same position she had been in when they first met, when she had knelt on his study floor with a broken crane in her hands. But everything was different now. "I would hate what this world demands of you," she said carefully. "But I could never hate you." His hand found her cheek. "That's not an answer." "Then here's your answer." She covered his hand with hers. "Don't let him turn you into something you're not. You've already won. You've already destroyed everything he built. Let the law have whatever's left of him." "The law." His smile was bitter. "The law doesn't work in my world." "Then change your world." He stared at her. "You make it sound simple." "It is simple. Not easy, but simple." Park Jin-ho was transferred to the authorities the next morning. The charges were extensive: attempted murder, kidnapping, conspiracy, corporate espionage. The evidence was overwhelming. The trial would take years. Seo Jun watched the transfer from the security monitors in his office, his face unreadable. Mrs. Kwan appeared in the doorway. "Sir? Miss Adeyemi is asking for you." He turned off the monitors. "Tell her I'm coming." Spring came to Seoul like a whisper. The frozen gardens thawed slowly, revealing green shoots and early blossoms. The mansion's windows were opened for the first time in months, letting in air that smelled of rain and new growth. Zara stood in the garden, their garden, watching the first cherry blossoms appear on the trees that lined the stone path. She was wearing her own clothes now, not the maid's uniform, not the golden gown. Simple things: jeans, a sweater, comfortable shoes. She looked like herself. She felt like herself for the first time in a very long time. The transition had not been simple. Moving from maid to whatever she was now, had required navigating a minefield of social expectations, cultural barriers, and the constant awareness that the world was watching. The staff had adjusted slowly. Mrs. Kwan had been the hardest to convince, not because she disapproved, but because she had spent her entire career maintaining the rigid hierarchies that governed the household. She is no longer staff, Seo-jun had told Mrs. Kwan on the day of the official change. She's family. Treat her accordingly. Mrs. Kwan had bowed. Then when Seo-jun had left the room, she had turned to Zara with an expression that was almost warm. I always knew, she said quietly. Knew what? That you would change him. She straightened her already perfect posture. He needed changing, even if he didn't know it. But the world outside the mansion was less kind. The media discovered the story within days. The billionaire and the maid, the mafia boss and the Nigerian woman who had tamed him. The headlines ranged from patronizing to cruel, the commentary from fascinated to vicious. The Black Cinderella of Seoul, one tabloid called her. Han Seo-jun's exotic weakness, declared another. Zara read them all with the same steady expression. Then she closed her laptop and went to the garden. Seo-jun found her there, standing beneath the cherry tree, petals drifting around her like pink snow. You've seen the articles. Yes. I'll have them taken down. No. She shook her head. If you silence them, they'll just talk louder. Let them say what they want. It doesn't bother you? She turned to face him. It bothers me, she admitted. It bothers me that they reduce what we have to a headline. That they see my skin color before they see me. That they call me your weakness when I'm... She trailed off. When you're what? Your partner. The word felt right. Not your weakness. Not your exotic anything. Your partner. He crossed the distance between them, his hands finding her waist. That familiar gesture, the one that had started everything. You are, he said. You always have been. That evening, Seo-jun made a call to his public relations team. Schedule a press conference, he said. Tomorrow morning. Sir? Regarding what? Regarding the future of the Han Corporation. And regarding the woman who will be standing beside me when I announce it. Silence on the other end. Sir, are you certain? I have never been more certain of anything in my life. The press conference was held in the Han Corporation's downtown headquarters, a glass tower that dominated Seoul's financial district. The conference room was packed. Journalists, photographers, business analysts, everyone jostling for position, cameras clicking in a continuous staccato. Seo-jun entered from the side door, impeccable in a navy suit that made his shoulders look carved from stone. The tattoo at his wrist was visible, deliberately as always. Beside him, holding his hand, was Zara. She wore white, a simple dress that her mother would have approved of, elegant without being ostentatious. Her braids were styled simply, her makeup minimal. She looked like exactly what she was. Herself. The room fell silent. Seo-jun stepped to the microphone. Thank you for coming, he said, his voice carrying the quiet authority that had built an empire. I will be brief. He looked at Zara. She nodded. For the past several months, my organization has been the target of a coordinated attack by elements within the Kim faction. These attacks included attempted murder, kidnapping, and the systematic infiltration of my security apparatus. Murmurs rippled through the room. The perpetrators have been apprehended and will face justice through proper legal channels. The Kim faction's criminal network has been permanently dissolved. He paused. But I am not here to talk about enemies. He turned to Zara, taking both her hands in his. The cameras exploded. I am here to introduce the woman who saved my life. Not once but every day. Not through force or strategy but through courage, compassion and a stubborn refusal to let me destroy myself. Zara's eyes widened. He had not told her what he planned to say. Her name is Zara Adeyemi. She came to this country with nothing but strength and dignity. She endured hardship that would have broken lesser people. She stood beside me when the world tried to tear us apart. His voice roughened. And she taught me something I had forgotten, that power without love is just another prison. He reached into his jacket pocket. The room held its breath. When his hand emerged, it held a small box, dark velvet, unmistakable. Zara's hands flew to her mouth. I had a speech prepared, Seo-jun said, and for the first time his voice trembled. Something eloquent and appropriate. But I find that He stopped. Started again. I find that the only words that matter are simple ones. He opened the box. Inside, nestled against black silk, was a ring. Not the massive diamond one might expect from a billionaire, but something more personal. A band of dark gold, set with a single stone that caught the light and scattered it into 1,000 tiny rainbows. The same stone the crystal crane had been made of. Zara Adeyemi. His eyes held hers, dark and deep and shining with an emotion he had spent a lifetime suppressing. Will you marry me? The room was silent. Every camera, every journalist, every person in the building seemed to hold their breath. Zara stared at the ring. Then at the man holding it. Then at the ring again. You're asking me this, she said slowly, in front of the entire Seoul press corps. Yes. On live television. Yes. In a room full of people who have spent weeks calling me your weakness. Yes. She looked at the cameras. At the journalists with their recording devices, their notepads, their calculating eyes. Then she looked back at Seojun. You did this deliberately, she said. You wanted them to see. I wanted the world to see. His voice was quiet now, meant only for her despite the microphones that caught every syllable. I wanted every person who doubted you, who dismissed you, who tried to reduce what we have to a headline. I wanted them to witness this. Witness what? A man choosing love. His thumb brushed across her knuckles. Publicly. Permanently. Without reservation. He was crying. She had promised herself she wouldn't cry. Not here, not in front of these people, not when the cameras were watching. But the tears came anyway, tracking down her cheeks like the rain that had started everything. Yes, she said. The word was barely a whisper. Yes. Yes, you impossible man. She laughed through her tears. Yes, I'll marry you. The room erupted. Cameras flashed in a blinding strobe. Journalists shouted questions that neither of them heard. Somewhere, someone started clapping and the applause spread through the room like wildfire. Seojun slid the ring onto her finger. Then he kissed her. Not the desperate, hungry kisses of their early days, but something deeper. Something permanent. A kiss that was a promise and a declaration and a vow all at once. When they broke apart, his forehead resting against hers, his eyes closed, she heard him whisper the words he had taught her in his bed. Surang hae. I love you. She whispered them back. Surang hae. The wedding was held in 2 parts. The first ceremony took place in Seoul. A traditional Korean wedding, intimate and elegant, held in the garden of the mansion where they had first kissed beneath the winter moon. Seojun wore a traditional hanbok, dark silk that emphasized his sharp features, the tattoo at his wrist visible beneath the embroidered cuffs. He looked like what he was, a man of power tempered by love. Zara wore hanbok too, a stunning piece in crimson and gold, adapted to honor both Korean tradition and her own heritage. Her braids were threaded with gold wire, a crown of cherry blossoms nestled among them. Mrs. Kwon cried throughout the entire ceremony. She denied it afterward. No one believed her. The second ceremony took place in Lagos. Zara's mother met them at the airport. A small woman with Zara's eyes and a strength that made Seojun understand exactly where his wife had gotten her resilience. She looked at Seojun for a long moment. Then she said in accented English, "You are the one who made my daughter cry." "Yes, ma'am." "And you are the one who made her stop crying." "I try, ma'am." She studied him a moment longer. Then she pulled him into a hug that lifted him slightly off the ground. "Welcome to the family," she said. The Nigerian ceremony was everything the Korean one was not. Loud, colorful, joyful, bursting with music and dancing and food that seemed to appear from everywhere at once. Zara's younger brother, taller than Seojun had expected, with their mother's eyes and their father's quiet intelligence, served as best man. He shook Seojun's hand with a grip that was deliberately crushing. "If you hurt my sister," he said pleasantly, "I will find you. And I don't care how many bodyguards you have." "I would deserve it," Seojun said. The brother stared at him. Then grinned. "I like him," he said to Zara. "He's honest." "He's learning," she replied. They danced. Under the stars, surrounded by family and music and the warm Nigerian night, they danced. Seojun had never been a dancer, had never seen the point of movement without purpose. But Zara took his hands and pulled him close and moved with him until movement became its own purpose. "You're terrible at this," she murmured against his chest. "I'm aware. We should practice. Every night," he promised. "For the rest of our lives." They built a new life. Not the life either of them had imagined, but something better. Something forged from pain and danger and the stubborn refusal to let darkness win. Seojun restructured the Han Corporation, transitioning gradually from the shadows into legitimate business. It was not a clean process. The roots of his empire ran deep into soil that would never be fully clean. But he tried. For her he tried. Zara completed her education. The degree she had abandoned when her father died, when the debts consumed everything. She enrolled at Seoul National University, studying international law, sitting in lectures surrounded by students a decade younger than her. She excelled. She had always excelled. She just needed someone to believe she could. The mansion changed too. Slowly, subtly, it transformed from a fortress into a home. Zara's touch was everywhere. Fresh flowers in hallways that had been sterile, warmth in rooms that had been cold, laughter in spaces that had known only silence. The cameras in the staff quarters were removed. The West Wing was converted into offices for Zara's Legal Foundation, a non-profit dedicated to helping immigrant workers navigate the Korean legal system. Mrs. Kwon became the foundation's first employee. She was terrifyingly efficient. 1 year after the press conference, on a spring evening when the cherry blossoms were at their peak, Zara found Seojun in their garden. He was standing beneath the willow tree, the same tree where he had first touched her cheek, where he had kissed her in the moonlight, where everything had truly begun. He was holding something. She approached slowly, her footsteps soft on the stone path. "What's that?" He turned to face her. In his hands was the crystal crane, the one she had broken and repaired, the one that had sat in the center of his desk for over a year, catching the light and scattering rainbows. "My father told me this represented control," he said. "That stillness and discipline were the only paths to power." He looked at the crane, at the place where Zara's repair had transformed the damage into something new. He was wrong. What does it represent now? Seojun smiled. It was not the terrible smile she had seen that night in the garden, the one that promised violence. It was not the crooked smile from the study, the one that had made him look young. It was something new, something whole. "It represents you," he said. "The one who took something broken and made it beautiful." He set the crane down on the garden wall, positioning it carefully so it caught the evening light. Then he took her hands. "Thank you," he said, "for staying, for fighting, for loving a man who didn't know how to love himself. You knew how. You just forgot. Then thank you for reminding me." He kissed her beneath the cherry blossoms, petals drifting around them like pink snow. The mansion stood behind them, no longer a fortress but a home. Its windows glowed with warm light, its gardens bloomed with life, its corridors echoed with sounds that had been absent for far too long. Laughter. Music. The footsteps of people who were not afraid. And in the study on the desk where it had always rested, the crystal crane caught the last rays of the setting sun and scattered them across the walls. Broken once. Repaired with love. More beautiful for having been shattered. 2 years later. The nursery was Seojun's idea. He designed it himself. Something he had never done before, had never imagined doing. He spent weeks poring over paint samples and furniture catalogs, consulting with designers, arguing with Mrs. Kwon about the proper thread count for infant bedding. "You're being ridiculous," Zara told him, watching from the doorway as he measured the distance between the crib and the window for the 14th time. "I'm being thorough. You're being a father." He stopped measuring. Turned to face her. "Am I?" She placed his hand on her stomach. "You are." The tattoo on his wrist caught the nursery light, that old symbol of power and discipline and control. Beneath his palm something moved. Small and fierce and undeniable. Han Seojun, the man who never lost control, the feared financier, the former Mafia boss who had brought empires to their knees, felt his eyes fill with tears for the second time in his adult life. "Hello," he whispered to the life beneath his hand. Zara covered his hand with hers. "Hello, little one," she said. Outside the nursery window, Seoul sparkled in the twilight. Somewhere in the city, deals were being made. Alliances formed and broken. Power traded like currency. But here in this room, in this house, in this moment, there was only love. Broken, rebuilt, stronger than before. The crane standing still above rushing water, patient and beautiful and absolutely certain of what it held. Not control. Never control. But something infinitely more powerful. Something worth every scar. Every tear. Every storm survived. Love. Thank you for staying with us through this entire journey. If Seojun and Zara's story moved you, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who loves dark romance, and subscribe to our channel for more stories like this. Your support means the world to us. Until next time.